What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Tips in 10, where we give you the top tips in the least amount of time. This series was built to help you stay in the know without taking a chunk out of your schedule. Let's welcome today's guest, Todd Cherches. Todd is the CEO and co-founder of BigBlueGumball, an innovative New York City-based management, leadership, and an executive coaching firm. He's a member of Marshall Goldsmith's 100 Coaches, a three-time award-winning adjunct professor of leadership at NYU and Columbia University, not bad, a TEDx speaker, amazing, and the author of the groundbreaking book, Visual Leadership, leveraging power of visual thinking in leadership and in life. You ready to go, Todd? Let's get this party started.
I am ready. I got 10 minutes or more for you, but let's just keep it to 10.
Excellent. Well, let's get this party started. So your book is called Visual Leadership, leveraging the power of visual thinking in leadership and life. What is it about, and how would how would reading it help our viewers or listeners to be more effective and more successful?
Well, one of the biggest challenges every business professional faces is how do you get people to see what you're saying, right? So that's my central metaphor, is that of vision. And when you ask people, what's the first word you think of when you hear the word leadership, the word vision is usually the first word that comes to mind, right? So looking backwards, we need to think about what we see is based on how we see the world is based on our background, our life experiences, our culture, our education, all that kind of stuff. It helps us to see certain things but miss other things, right? And then in terms of the future, we all have a vision of the future. We all have a picture in our mind's eye of what we want the future to look like. That's the other aspect. So when you can use visual thinking, it'll help you to be more effective by reflecting on the past, but also envisioning the future. So that's, in a nutshell, that's the summary of what the concept of visual leadership is all about.
And how long have you been doing this for?
Well, that's a tricky question. I've been doing it my whole life, right? Someone once asked Abe Lincoln, how long did it take you to write the Gettysburg Address? He said, my entire life, right? So it's kind of like that kind of question. But in reality, my book came out in May of 2020, just as the pandemic had started. I had been working on my book for 10 or 15 years. When I sat down to write, because I'm a business book addict, and I started reading one business book a week. Actually, I started reading 3 to 5 business books around 1998, and I've been reading an average of one a week ever since. So over the last 24 years, I've read over 1,200 business books, and you can see many of them on my shelves behind me. And I was always quoting them and referencing them and recommending them, and people started saying, when are you going to write your own book? And it was like one of those someday things that you never get around to, or you're like, who am I to write a book, right? I'm not an author or whatever. But I started accumulating content, stories, models, before I realized I had about 15 years and 2,000 pages, without exaggeration, worth of content. And I finally met an author, and I said, how do you get a book published? And he introduced me to his agent. We did a proposal. We pitched it to major publishers, and I got a book deal with Post Hill Press, Simon & Schuster. And then it was scary, because it was like, all right, you have 9 months to deliver your first draft. So after talking about it for years, it was like, now you actually have to write it. So I had to lock myself away in this office for 4 months with an editor on the other end, and I got the book done. So that's the story of how it came to be.
I love it. Listen, those that are looking to write books, start writing now. I mean, it could be your book could come out in 2 years. It could come out in 10 years.
Yeah. Keep a journal. Just download everything from your mind. And then before you realize it, you have enough content for a book. Because the other side is like, I'm going to sit down and write a book. And you're just staring at a blank screen saying, all right, what do I say? Right. So that's a great advice, is to start writing it way before you actually need to, right?
Absolutely. So you write and talk about 4 ways anyone can be more effective visual thinker and visual communicator. Briefly explain to us what the 4 ways are and how we can use them.
Sure. Even though it's called visual leadership, it's not just for, quote, leaders with a title. We all have to lead and manage our own lives. So you are a leader, you are a manager, even if you don't have direct reports, even if you're an entrepreneur who works for him or herself, right? So I break it down into 4 categories, as I discussed in the book. Category 1 is using visual imagery and or props and or pictures, anything you could see with your eye. right? So I may say to you, Mike, I'm curious about something. I want to ask you a question. Or I might say, Mike, you need to be a little more flexible. You need to bend over backwards to serve your clients. You're not going to forget those. You have to think more globally, not just locally, right? So just using visual imagery and props and humor helps people to get a picture in their mind's eye. So that's category 1, is using imagery. Category 2 is using mental models and frameworks. So we're all familiar with a lot of mental models like Maslow's hierarchy of needs pyramid or the time management matrix. So anytime you can put something in a box or a matrix, it helps us to frame a problem, because life is complex and messy. But if we could simplify it, we don't want to put people in boxes, but if we could create some kind of framework or model, it helps us to see problems and solve them more quickly and more clearly. So that's category 2. Category 3 is using metaphors and analogies, right? So if I say to you, Mike, there's no magic solution. You can't just wave a magic wand to solve your problem. You actually have to do the work. That's a metaphor, right? If I say we need to stop, start, and continue doing certain things, you may think about a traffic light as a metaphor for stopping something, starting something, and continuing something, right? So just like visual imagery, a metaphor compares something dissimilar to something we're talking about so that you remember it. It helps to clarify. And category 4 is using visual storytelling, which is basically painting a picture with words. It's creating a mental movie in the mind of others so that they can actually see what you're saying. So if I tell you a story, you can actually visualize it almost as if you're watching a mental movie. And when you do that, it helps people to understand. So I always talk about 3 things: attention, comprehension, and retention. I talk about this in my TED Talk on the power of visual thinking. When you use any of these techniques, it captures people's attention, it gets them to focus, helps them to understand, and gets them to remember. So that's my book summary in 90 seconds or however long that took.
No, that was so good. And me, myself, I'm a huge visual learner, right? I am all about the visual. I know that in your book, you talked about, like, you could watch TV all day because you're a visual learner too, as well.
Yeah.
So I'm huge into visual, and I love looking up statistics and whatnot and being ready for today's tips in 10. I looked up a few things and I found some really cool stats. 90% of the information processed by the brain is visual.
Yeah.
That is incredible. And the human brain processes images 60,000 times faster than text.
Yeah.
That is unbelievable.
Yeah.
That is unbelievable. So
it's just the way we're wired. Yeah, it's just the way our brains are wired, right? Like, if you go on LinkedIn, are you more likely to link in with someone you don't know if they have a headshot or if they don't, right? You want the headshot. If you go onto Amazon or eBay to buy something, would you buy it just from the description if there's no picture, right? Black and color rules over black and white. So again, we're just drawn to visual imagery, and that's just the way we're wired and the way we think and problem solve.
And it's an international language, right? I mean, just like when you had your first job, when they sent you over, I think, was it Singapore or
China?
Shenzhen,
China, yes.
Yeah, China. So you were trying to speak to them, and you had to show them.
Yeah, it turned into a game of Pictionary and charades. Because if I needed a hammer, it's a lot easier to get a hammer when you don't know the word for China. If you could either show someone this is what I need or sketch out a drawing of it, and that's what we ended up doing. It was like 2 words, sounds like tape measure, right? So we just needed to sketch it out or mime it, and we got it done. We got the project done, crossing cultural lines. And I teach leadership at NYU, and a lot of my students are international students, and they love that we use visual imagery because it helps to, translate across language barriers. So
Yep, that's so good. So I got one more question for you. Yeah. What is one thing, one tool, tip, or technique that people can start doing immediately to be a more effective visual leader?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, but if I had to just say one, I would say to start noticing things that are right in front of you. Look at things through a different lens. Try to see things from the lens of others. I have a concept called flipping the eye. So the cover of my book has this rainbow-colored eye. The rainbow-colored eye represents diversity and inclusion, and just as no one in the world has a rainbow-colored eye, remember that no one sees the world exactly the same way you do, right? So you need to use all the colors in the crayon box to paint a picture of a world that other people can understand, but then you also need to flip the eye, which is to look internally at how you see the world, but also try to see the world through the lens of others. That's my top tip that I would offer to people.
No, love it, love it. Well, we can't just be all business here, okay? We got to have a little bit of fun too. So
That wasn't fun. I thought I was having fun.
wait, oh my gosh! I mean, we got to have like a little bit of joking around.
Even more fun, you mean? Okay.
You know.
All right.
So I like to do a little speed round questions.
All right.
And so let's kick this thing off with M&Ms or Reese's Pieces.
Oh, that's a tough one. I would say M&Ms. I like a Reese's peanut butter cup, but when it comes to the pieces, I'll take an M&M. I'm old school in that way.
I'm a huge peanut butter guy, so I'm going with Reese's Pieces.
All right.
Obviously, read the book or watch the movie.
I love both, but yeah, that's close. But I love a movie. If it's a novel, if it's nonfiction, I mean, if it's fiction, I definitely take the movie because I read so much. That yeah, I'll take the movie occasionally. You have to give your brain a rest and just take in the imagery and the story.
I love it. I love it. So on a night out, are you the first to go home or last to stay out?
I am the last to get there and the first to leave. Even though I talk loud and fast, because I'm a New Yorker, I'm an extreme introvert. I always say I'm a 3Bs guy, a back of the room, behind the scenes bookworm. So when it comes to social events, definitely the last to get there and the first to leave.
Awesome. That was great. So how can our listeners, learn more about you? How can they get the book? Please share.
Sure. The best way is just go to my website, toddcherches.com. I also have my company website, which is BigBlueGumball.com, but that's for my business side. But if you want to watch my TED Talk and learn more about visual thinking and visual leadership, just go to toddcherches.com. That's spelled with an E, not a U. And then to get the book, just Visual Leadership, wherever books are sold, Amazon or anywhere else. Now, some people get the audio book, but there's kind of an irony about listening to a book about visual thinking, right? So, and as you know, my book is filled with visual imagery. So, but it's great if you listen to the audio book and read the book, then I sell 2 books in one stone. So there you go.
No, it is good. It is good. And I love it. I love it. I couldn't believe it. When I picked up the book, when you first sent it to me, I couldn't believe the weight of it. I mean, it's like heavy, heavy.
Well, that's because it's full. That's because it's in full color with glossy imagery, and every chapter has a picture, right? So, and the publisher wanted to do it in black and white at first. I'm like, you can't have a book on visuals that's in black and white. So I actually had to pay out of pocket for the cost difference between the color and the black and white, but it was well worth it. So, but that's why the pages are so thick. It's because it's full color throughout. So they had to use extra thick, glossy paper to accommodate.
Awesome. Well, Todd, thank you so much for joining us on Tips in 10. You were an amazing guest and have brought so much value. Thank you so much.